All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking how one quiet guy from a dairy farm in Reggiolo completely dismantled the modern myth of the loud, visionary leader. We're going to be exploring the career and the underlying methods of Carlo Ancelotti, pulling directly from Jan Marrow's really fascinating book, Don Carlo. We're going to see exactly how Ancelotti built a 30-year career of just unprecedented success. And he did it not by shouting the loudest, but by completely mastering the human element of leadership.
Society kind of fetishizes the disruptor, right? The obsessive. The cultural script tells us that greatness requires imposing this really strong, fixed idea on a resistant world. We expect our leaders to be these furious geniuses who run on pure intensity, perfectionists who literally cannot rest, and who demand everyone bend entirely to their one singular philosophy. But what if greatness doesn't actually require all that shouting? What if that furious genius archetype we all know is really only half the story?
Well, we are going to explore how Carlo Ancelotti became the single most decorated manager in European football history simply by keeping calm and raising his signature eyebrow. Just think about that single gesture for a second. One eyebrow lifting maybe a bare centimeter on the touchline, while a 90,000-seat stadium is just completely convulsing around him. That look? It's the visible surface of a deeply intentional, highly effective leadership method. It might look like passivity to the untrained eye, but as we'll see, it's absolutely anything but. The numbers speak for themselves. 5 Champions League trophies as a coach. League titles in 5 major countries. Italy, England, France, Germany, and Spain. It's literally an unprecedented level of success. He outwon the angry visionaries by holding his methods loosely and his attention to people tightly. He didn't just get lucky once or twice. He's proved conclusively that you can reach the absolute summit of your profession without burning out the very people who got you there. Section 1. The Myth of the Genius. Let's quickly unpack exactly why the cultural script of the angry genius is fundamentally flawed when it comes to getting the absolute best out of human beings over a long period of time. Which brings us to Section 2, learning from exact opposites. It's absolutely fascinating how Ancelotti built his leadership style by experiencing 2 extreme polar opposites as a player. Most leaders build their philosophy entirely as a reaction against the worst boss they ever had. But Ancelotti had this rare opportunity to learn from 2 brilliant masters of the game who are complete opposites. On one hand, you have the warmth of a sun. At Roma, he learned humane, trust-based leadership from Niels Liedholm, who managed the temperature of the dressing room, not the volume, and treated players as highly intelligent adults. On the other hand, you have rigid gears. At AC Milan, Ancelotti played under Arrigo Sacchi. Now, Sacchi was a revolutionary who demanded relentless, drilled structure and intense pressing. He asked players to subordinate themselves entirely to a rigid system. And Ancelotti won big under both of them. He experienced the warmth of the sun and the ruthless intensity of the machine. Now, a lesser mind would have been forced to pick a side, right? Ancelotti refused. He synthesized them. He kept the structural, gear-like organization and the tactical seriousness of Sacchi. But he actively left behind the exhausting fanaticism that eventually just burns teams out. Instead, he replaced that fanaticism with Liedholm's trusting, warm authority. And that synthesis? That's the crown jewel of his method. He held on to the rigor but ditched the rigidity, which became the absolute foundation of everything he built. Let's move to Section 3, adapting to the player. Because this mindset didn't just appear perfectly formed overnight. It evolved from his early, incredibly stubborn days into his ultimate mastery. Yeah, early in his coaching career at Parma, Ancelotti was actually pretty rigid. He had a specific system, and he tried to force incredibly creative players into a tight, predefined box. But when they struggled and chafed against it, he actually learned from that friction. He realized that treating his tactical preferences as hypotheses rather than a fixed identity allowed him to stop forcing players into boxes. He shifted his entire paradigm from how do you fit my system to what system fits your genius. He let them become the star. And there's no better example of this than how he handled Andrea Pirlo. He literally reverse-engineered an entire team formation, creating the famous 4-3-2-1 Christmas tree just to unlock Pirlo's specific gifts. See, Pirlo was a brilliant number 10, a creative, attacking midfielder, but his path was totally blocked by other world-class players already in that spot. So instead of forcing Pirlo to adapt to the wing or, simply selling him, Ancelotti slid him backwards into a deep-lying playmaker role. He totally subordinated his own ego and preferences to build a structure that let his best player thrive. So if someone on your team is struggling, before you blame their effort, maybe ask if you've actually put them in the right role. Okay, section 4. The power of the buffer. This adaptability builds into a crucial concept that separates Ancelotti from almost everyone else in high-stakes, ruthless environments. This invisible work of buffering is absolutely vital. Basically, what it means is metabolizing the anxiety of incredibly demanding bosses. We're talking about guys like Silvio Berlusconi at Milan or Roman Abramovich at Chelsea, so the dressing room can just focus entirely on football. A weak leader passes the immense pressure from above straight down to the team, and it crushes them. Ancelotti absorbs it. He stands between the team and the severe weather from above, and he takes the storm himself. As a result, the team just experiences this calm, completely controlled environment. And his buffering is never, ever more important than in a crisis. Think about the 2005 Champions League final in Istanbul. Milan surrendered a 3-0 lead in what is easily one of the most traumatic, heartbreaking collapses in sports history. But inside that ruined dressing room, Ancelotti didn't panic. He didn't point fingers. He didn't tear the team apart to save his own reputation. He acted as an umbrella, containing the storm and preserving the group's psyche. And because he kept them whole and shielded them from the fallout, 2 years later in Athens, that exact same team won the ultimate redemption. He absorbed the failure so his players could live to fight again. But of course, section 5, the limits of trust. Any model is only useful if you can see exactly where it breaks. Which brings us to his time managing Bayern Munich. Ancelotti's trust-based style actually caused real friction at Bayern. Why? Because that specific group of incredibly successful veterans actually wanted the hammer. They wanted relentless drilling and highly visible intensity from their manager. It proves his method isn't just some magic wand, it's highly conditional. It relies on a team of self-motivated professionals who use their given freedom to aggressively raise their own standards. If a group inherently needs direction and intensity imposed upon them from the outside, Ancelotti's light-as-a-feather touch can actually feel like a completely directionless vacuum. Every leadership style has its distinct domain, and for sure, Bayern was the limit of his. All right, let's distill all of this. Section 6, the Ancelotti playbook. 30 years of unmatched success across PSG, Chelsea, and Real Madrid boiled down into a core playbook. When you track his career, the sheer scale of his longevity is just absolutely staggering. From a 1995 Serie B promotion all the way to agreeing to manage the Brazilian national team in 2025. This multi-decade span shows that his specific brand of relational leadership compounds massive value over time. By not burning out his teams or himself with relentless fanaticism, he built deep trust. And trust is this invisible asset that just accumulates immense value year after year, job after job. A massive part of that sustained longevity is creating what the corporate world likes to call psychological safety. His legendary 2022 and 2024 Champions League comebacks with Real Madrid, they weren't just luck or magic. They were the direct physiological result of highly skilled players operating in an environment where it was safe to take audacious risks without fear of a screaming catastrophe. Under extreme pressure, a panicking manager chemically narrows their team's vision and causes them to freeze. A calm manager prevents panic entirely. Ancelotti's calm isn't just a relaxed mood, it's a direct physiological intervention that keeps his players thinking clearly when absolutely everyone else is losing their heads. So the playbook really boils down to 4 core principles. First, authority is earned, not asserted. If you constantly have to tell people you're in charge, you aren't. Second, separate the controllable from the uncontrollable. He never let an unjust sacking or a bad bounce destroy his core self-worth. Third, always praise in public and challenge in private. He ruthlessly protected his players' dignity. And finally, manage the person to get the player. This is exactly how he handled massive egos like Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Instead of trying to dominate Zlatan to prove a macho point about who is the boss, he simply cleared the psychological obstacles out of the way so Zlatan's natural, ferocious drive could completely thrive. Because at the end of the day, getting the people right means the system can be almost anything. If your people feel deeply understood, totally trusted, and effectively protected, they will lift the entire machine up on their own shoulders. A brilliant, flawlessly designed system will never, ever save you if you treat your people as disposable, identical cogs to just be brutally hammered into place. The people aren't just operating the system, they are the point. So I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Are you forcing your team to fit a rigid, predetermined system? Or are you actively adapting your methods to unlock the specific genius of your people? The immense power of the raised eyebrow, the power of calm, steady trust, is available to all of us. But it all starts with realizing that the people, not the system, are the point. Until next time, keep adapting.